and put back anyway, so there's no reason to go after that dog. It's a habit. Everything is habitual. Even in humans, everything is habitual. So it's not so much the matter of, oh, I need my dog to sit because sitting somehow is better than standing, and laying down is somehow better than sitting. It's just more a matter of, I need the dogs to understand that whatever it is that I say goes, and not for any other reason than it's for your own good, and I know what's best for you. If you have an aggressive dog, I can guarantee anybody this. It's much healthier for your dog to go through training, as tough on the dog as it may be for a few weeks. It's much healthier for him to go through that period and then live the rest of their life with a newfound sense of freedom and a newfound sense of love from their owners, because as much as people love their dogs even when they're aggressive, it is stressful. And if your dog doesn't do that anymore, you'll enjoy some more stuff with him. You'll be more likely to take him places because he behaves better, and the dog will enjoy an overall greater quality of life. Being closer to the owner, spending more time under praise as opposed to correction, not being a source of anxiety for the owners, and and everything just gets better. So when you're working the manners, when you're working focus and impulse control, make sure that you work it to a very high degree so that the dog performs when it matters. It doesn't really matter when it's just my two dogs that get along perfectly fine, if I have one stay and one come. But it does matter when I'm playing fetch with my dogs off leash and a dog sees the ball that I'm throwing for my dog, and that strange dog runs over to the ball and my dog is already halfway to it. I need to recall my dog before he tries to get to the ball because I don't want any nonsense. I don't want to risk anything. So I need my dogs to perform immediately, especially if I've got other dogs around myself. Now, one more point I want to touch on is the state of mind when it comes to dog training, but this refers more to the dog itself, not so much the owner, like when we were talking about boundaries. I want the dog's state of mind to be monitored and adjusted if necessary. This ties into corrections, but this is where corrections and praise become a little different than simply obedience training. I believe that it is fair to correct a dog for a certain state of mind. If I've got a dog that I know to be reactive and I'm walking around with him on a leash, let's say I have him in a heel and somebody else is walking opposite me going the other direction with their dog in a heel, and my dog doesn't lunge after the other dog, but he kind of slows down and stops and eyeballs the other dog while he passes by. Even that I would correct, and I would correct it way before it ever got to that point, because the dog's intent is building. The dog hadn't gotten to the point where it was going to take off after that other dog yet, but he would have gotten there. If that man were to have stopped and his dog were just hanging out next to this guy, a point would come where the dog would try to snap. So, with that being said, if I'm heeling my dog and another dog's walking in the opposite direction, as soon as the dog that I'm heeling notices that dog at a distance and starts to get tense, maybe his little wrinkles in his forehead area kind of perk up and his ears perk up and he stands tall and his chest looks deep and all tense, kind of posturing like macho behavior. The second I see any of that, I correct him swiftly, either with the prong collar or an e-collar. I tell him with the correction, I time it together, no. And with the correction, the dog's attention is broken from that dog because the correction, has such a mental kind of shock factor. So the dog looks back to me because I just corrected him. He's, kind of looks at me like, whoops, what did I do? And when I get that, I tell him heel. So it should be no, heel, as soon as the dog looks in my direction. That's the point of a correction, whether the dog is aggressive or not. The point of any correction is not to hurt the dog or anything else. It's just to grab attention. But once you have attention, I can't say it enough. Once you have the dog's attention, it is still your job to command the dog or to train the dog. I've seen a lot of trainers that will just correct the dog, bang, no, and just keep walking. And the dog catches on. I mean, the dog does understand he's in a heel and everything, but a lot of them get a little too confident in what the e-collars can do and what the prong collars can do. They just grab attention. It's just a tool that does one job. It's one job that solves many problems, but it's just one job. It's grab the dog's attention, stop the dog, kind of bring the dog back to neutral. So if my dog is charging hard after a squirrel, the e-collar just does one job. It doesn't recall the dog. It just gets his attention. Boom, whoops, what did I do? And then it's my job. You come. So you correct the dog, time it with a no. So leash pop, no, or e-collar button, no. And once the dog looks at you, which should take half a second, heel. So it should be no, heel, or no, sit, no, down, whatever the command was. So when you're working the dog's state of mind, the correction there, because remember, the dog didn't necessarily break my heel. He kind of slowed down a little bit, but let's pretend that the leash was long enough that it wasn't even taut. So he never even put tension on my leash, breaking a manner. He slowed down to look at the other dog, never broke my heel. So what's the correction for? The correction is for the intent. The correction is for that hard stare at the other dog. And the intent, if he got the opportunity to lunge, or at least to growl and bark or whatever else, the intent to revert back to what the dog has conditioned himself to know. So I correct right at that moment. The dog's walking around, he yelling, oops, I see a dog. Boom, whoop, no, I don't see a dog. I want the dog's focus. So it is fair to correct a dog for a certain state of mind. Or if a dog, I find that, if you're in a kennel and dogs kind of stare each other down in like a daycare where they're all off leash, that's correctable. I would correct everyone and I'd put them in like a downstay, or I'd separate them or something else. Or I'd, put them both on leash and work them both together. But that kind of posturing behavior, that question that dogs kind of press onto each other is, who's top dog, me or you, so to speak, that's correctable, because that question is no longer applicable under training, under, a human household. I don't want my dog ever wondering, can I dominate this dog but not this dog? I don't want my dog ever wondering, should I snap at him but not him? Because trainers that deal in aggression will kind of find that certain dogs snap more toward either small dogs or big dogs, or dogs kind of have sometimes this like preference as to who they go after. It's almost strategic, but it should be irrelevant, because I don't care if the dog is 200 pounds or a little chihuahua, whatever the case may be. You are not allowed to snap. You are not even allowed to stare with intent. You are allowed to do one thing, and that's focus on me and what I'm asking of you. So that's what I mean by correcting for the state of mind. Keep the dog's focus, keep the dog's attention, and keep the dog's intent on one thing. Dogs drive hard, mentally, that is. So it's almost as if they can't do anything leisurely. They have to do everything to a high degree. So if you were to give a dog commands to do, the dog is going to do those commands quickly, because it wants to just go, because dogs are so energetic, they're so impulsive, they're just so ready to go. But if the dog wants to go after a dog, he's also going to go. So he's like the little Energizer Bunny, and it's not your job to stop the Energizer Bunny, because that drive is very good. In fact, that's what we love so much about dogs. Your job, though, is to take that little Energizer guy and make sure that he's traveling in the right direction. And if he's traveling in the wrong direction, that's what a correction's for. Boom, you turn him around, and then you head him back in the right direction. And then when he's heading that way, then you praise, and he's going to head there even faster. So when you're working a dog's state of mind, you want the focus, the attention, to be on things that are going to make him better, make him, kind of more reliable, safer, and make him safe as a result, because if a dog bites, we all know what happens. Now, the last thing, I guess it sort of is just a sub-note to the state of mind point, was focus. Keep the dog's focus, because if I have a dog that's nervous around other dogs, but I don't allow him to focus on any other dogs outside, on leash, or whatever the case may be, inside, if he's allowed to focus only on me, and if with obedience, with commands that are coming at him so fast, he doesn't have the time to focus on another dog, even if he wanted to, then he doesn't have the time to work himself up and get nervous around the other dogs. If I've got a dog that's nervous around other dogs, and I just kind of put him in a room somewhere, poor guy's going to freak out. If I take that same dog, put him on a leash in that room full of other dogs, and work him at a fast pace, he'll sit down. The dog has to focus on me, because, frankly, I'm the more pressing matter, because he's attached to my leash. Therefore, I kind of segue the dog into being in a room with other dogs while still being okay, because the dog isn't given the time or the space to have a reaction. And the great thing about that, the little light at the end of that dark tunnel, is as the dog gets better with commands, he's going to get praised more and more. So it's going to come to a point where being in that room with those dogs is something that the dog can do. And soon after that, it's going to be something that the dog can do pretty well. So it's going to be something that the dog starts to look forward to. This is something that the dog can accomplish. This is how you build confidence in a dog. This is how you get a dog to disengage from other dogs. And when these things start to happen, the dog gets a little confidence in him, the dog starts to listen, and you, as the trainer, become confident, because you've hammered commands into the dog so that you know, if one day I bring the dog into a kennel with another dog, and and he tries to get a little stiff, and I tell him, hey, leave it, or hey, recall him out of there, then he will actually listen in that moment. Even though he's highly aroused because he's looking at the other dog and the intent is huge, you need to be able to cut the intent immediately. No, leave it. And I want the dog to break eye contact the second you say that and bolt back to you. Now, when you can work dogs in that sense and the dog starts to flip interactions with other dogs, because keep in mind, a dog that is aggressive, it's really, really rare that I find a dog that's like being assertive and being aggressive to another dog, and that second dog, even if it's not aggressive, it's not going to react in some way. I mean, of course, the dog's going to protect himself. So even though aggressive dog starts it, the end result is still, oh, I got into a dog fight. Dogs kind of build up these like negative interactions with other dogs, and it's almost like they use these interactions as excuses to hate other dogs. That's why people think it's funny when they walk around their neighborhood and they're like, oh, my dog hates a certain dog. He always barks at this dog. The flip side to that, though, is you can condition a dog in the opposite sense. I've met plenty of dogs that have, poor things have been rescued from fighting mills or whatever. The dogs are bred as bait dogs. In fact, my personal dog was bred as a bait dog, and we got him from a rescue, and the poor guy was highly reactive, highly aggressive. So he had no reason to trust being around other dogs, and I understood that at the time. But over time, though, I've created more scenarios where being around dogs is a good thing, a praiseable thing, and I'm happy for it, and my dog does well, as long as he does well. If not, I correct him, but then that doesn't flip, the mood of the day. I'll correct him, put him in a downstay, or put him on a leash or something else, but we keep pushing, we keep moving forward. The dog starts to learn, like, oh, you know what, being around other dogs isn't so bad. I always tell people that people with aggressive dogs, of course it's accidentally, but they're very good about conditioning their dog to fear other dogs because they fear the other dogs. So I've met so many people that have an aggressive dog, and when another dog comes around, the first thing they do for safety is they'll snatch the leash really short and they'll pull really tight so the dog is under tension, even if it's on like a prong, and they hold it and they say no, 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 and the dog's getting nervous because he's like bound and he's kind of pinned, and there's like tension on his neck, and he sees another dog, and the owner's getting nervous, and he's just kind of wondering, what's all this stuff? Is it that dog over there? Because when the dog goes away, guess what? So does the tension, so does the owner's nervousness, and then life goes back to being great. So the dog kind of correlates, like, wow, my owner really hates dogs. I should probably protect her or him. If that's the case, though, I can also make it so that when my dog was before he started interacting with dogs, but would just kind of coexist, if I had, a couple dogs loose with me in the house, he wouldn't play, but he would have no problem, peacefully running like around them or through them, through like a group of them to get to me. If I recall him, he just runs right to me with zero intent, doesn't look, doesn't anything else, because if he looks, I correct. I want him to run straight to me as if they didn't exist, and he does, and I praise it. I'll treat him and whatever else, and he starts to understand, not only is being around dogs not necessarily a bad thing, it's kind of cool, I get treats, I get whatever else. I want the dogs to understand that other dogs is not something to worry about. And if you have an aggressive dog, it doesn't even need to be something to like be excited about either. I'm realistic, and I understand not all dogs are ever going to be like totally social, but I do think that it's realistic to expect a dog to like coexist peacefully. So even though I don't think my pit bull will ever be totally social, it's rare that he like gets along and plays with dogs, but he coexists every day, and I expect that of him. I expect him not to react, not to get tense. If a dog presses him, I expect him to leave. I expect him, I work the leave it, the off, the out commands. Those things I think are fair. I don't want him to get into the habit of pushing space back. All the space in the house is mine. I decide who gets what. Therefore, it's not their job to compete, because competition is probably the biggest driver. I guess the argument could be made it's the only driver in one sense or another, whether it be like sexual competition. I've met unneutered males that fight over the human female in the house, even to the point where as the males got older because they were young, they even started to get growly with the woman's husband. Kind of spatial competition in a daycare. I've seen that. Social dogs getting into fights. I've seen that. So when you take away the need for competition and the need to protect themselves for a nervous, fearful dog, then the